protect and watch over me, as a shepherd watches over his flock.
Jojo, Musa, Bao, Jojo, Bao.
Wat is sterpenet, Hamamen, Mariams.
Even in grave robbing, learning an extra language gives you one more chance to survive. The mummy stretched out its claws towards the grave robber, and there were a lot of gold inside. The mummy also said that as long as the grave robber worked hard, there would be plenty of rewards. What this mummy wanted to know was, where the other sacred urns were placed. The story begins in the court of Pharaoh Seti I. Pharaoh Seti had a stunningly beautiful concubine named Anxunamun. Anxunamun's curvaceous figure and captivating posture made countless ministers gaze admiringly, but except for the pharaoh, any man who touched her would be sentenced to death. To show his supreme authority, the pharaoh had Anxunamun's entire body painted with unique colored patterns. Who would have thought that Imhotep, the bald high priest in the court, was having an affair with Anxunamun in a secret chamber? Just as the two were lost in passion, Pharaoh suddenly returned to the palace, though. At the moment the pharaoh entered the door, Imhotep hid in time. Anxunamun's flustered eyes quickly gave her away, and at this moment the pharaoh noticed the colored patterns that had long been messed up by lust. At this critical juncture, Imhotep appeared and drew his sword. Just as the pharaoh was about to ask, Anxunamun also quickly pulled out her dagger, with the pharaoh's shrill scream piercing the silent palace. The pharaoh was betrayed by the two of them, and ruthlessly slain. On the spot, however, as the pharaoh's piercing wails still echoed, the pharaoh's bodyguards arrived. Imhotep was hastily taken away by his subordinates. Anxunamun knew she couldn't escape justice, yet still chose to stand in the way of the swarming bodyguards. At night, Imhotep, who had escaped, in order to resurrect Anxunamun, led a group of devout monks, and quietly transported Anxunamun's body out of the palace, to the depths of the desert, to Hamyonaptra, the legendary city of the dead. Hamyonaptra was the burial place of pharaohs of all dynasties, and a gathering place for countless burial treasures, and forbidden secret arts. From among the many burial objects, Imhotep took out the forbidden book symbolizing death, the Book of the Dead. They placed Anxunamun's internal organs, each in an exquisitely carved urn, preparing to summon her soul back from the underworld, along with Imhotep's deep and eerie incantations. In the pool directly opposite the altar, a dark, massive soul gradually condensed. The dim soul, summoned by the incantations, slowly approached Anxunamun's body, as if crossing the boundary between life and death, attempting to complete that forbidden and harmful resurrection ritual. However, just as the ritual was about to be completed, the pharaoh's bodyguards suddenly broke through the door, interrupting the ritual. The soul that had not yet fully fused with the body suddenly pulled away in the chaos, returning to the underworld. The monks were arrested and subjected to cruel punishment, and turned into cold mummies one by one. As for Imhotep, he was subjected to the terrifying penalty of being eaten by scarabs. It was the most fearsome of all ancient curses, so dreadful that it had never been carried out before. After his entire body was mummified, craftsmen poured a bucket full of scarabs on him. These insects would slowly gnaw away his flesh, condemning his soul and body to never find peace. He would also be trapped in the sarcophagus forever, unable to die. Yet it was the paradox brought about by this cruel punishment that sowed the seeds of endless resentment. Once this resentment surged to the extreme, he would return to the mortal world as a 1,000-year-old demon, bringing boundless catastrophe. Therefore, to prevent this disaster, the ancient Egyptian tomb guardians suppressed Imhotep under the statue of Anubis, which symbolizes death and judgment. Letting time pass by, time quickly came to 1923. 3,000 years of wind and sand failed to calm the anger of that ancient undead. Hamyonaptra had transformed from a legendary forbidden land into a nightmarish paradise for treasure hunters. In this gloomy desert, a team of adventurers stepped into this cursed city with great anticipation, but as soon as they entered the ruins, the team fell into unprecedented chaos, because the local armed forces were too powerful. Before the battle even started, the leader of the treasure hunting team hastily fled on horseback.
You just got promoted.
But facing the surging enemies on the opposite side, Benny, a subordinate of O'Connell, still thought his life was more important, waved goodbye at the critical moment of life and death, abandoning O'Connell without hesitation. And undoubtedly in this battle, the enemy, relying on their overwhelming numerical advantage, pushed O'Connell's team back steadily, and O'Connell was also forced to flee in panic. He was cornered in front of an ancient stone statue. At this moment, the guns in the enemy's hands were all pointed at him in unison. Just as he thought his fate had come to an end, closed his eyes tightly, waiting for the end, an accident quietly happened. For some unknown reason, the armed team retreated mysteriously one after another, leaving O'Connell alone. O'Connell felt a chill in his heart. As he looked around, trying to find the answer, he turned around instinctively, only to see behind him the towering statue of Anubis. In an instant, the yellow sand beside O'Connell surged wildly, constantly pouncing on him. Seeing this, O'Connell had to use both hands and feet to flee in haste, but he didn't notice on the sand where he had left. A face gradually emerged. It was none other than the buried high priest Imhotep from 3,000 years ago. However, everything that happened was being watched by a team on the high ground of the desert. They were the descendants of the pharaoh's bodyguards, guarding this place for generations. To prevent Imhotep from being released, at this time, O'Connell became the only survivor in the exploration team. He stumbled and wandered in the desolate desert. Time soon came 3 years later. At this moment, in a museum in Cairo, Evelyn was on duty. Suddenly, she heard an unusual noise coming from the warehouse. Holding a torch, she went to check carefully, only to be scared out of her wits by a mummy that suddenly sat up from a coffin. It turned out that all this was a prank played by her naughty brother Jonathan. Jonathan held an antique bought from the black market, insisting that she appraise its value. Evelyn had a strong interest in profound accumulation in ancient Egyptian history, culture, and archaeological knowledge. At this moment, Evelyn accidentally discovered a mysterious map hidden in a round box. It was exactly the treasure map pointing to Hamyonaptra. The two hurriedly handed the map to the museum curator for appraisal, but unexpectedly, while handling it, the curator accidentally burned most of the map. Faced with this sudden disaster, the brother and sister rushed to save it, but they never expected that the burned part was the key part indicating Hamyonaptra's location. But this didn't stop the brother and sister from their curiosity and longing for Hamyonaptra, so they went to the Cairo prison and found O'Connell, who had returned from Hamyonaptra before. This map was exactly the one that Jonathan had stolen from O'Connell. Everyone was full of curiosity and greed for Hamyonaptra. In order to find the entrance to the city of the dead as soon as possible, O'Connell led this temporarily assembled treasure hunting team, boarded a ship heading for the ruins. However, they were not the only team on the ship. Another treasure hunting team from the United States was arrogant, and the leader was none other than Benny, O'Connell's former subordinate. He even made a bet with O'Connell. Whoever could enter Hamyonaptra first would get to keep all the treasures inside for themselves. And at this moment, a row of mysterious footprints suddenly appeared on the deck. It seemed that someone had emerged from the sea, boarding the ship quietly. At the same time, inside the cabin, Evelyn was brushing her hair. Just as she bent down to pick something up, when she stood up, she found an extra man in black behind her.
Where is the map? And the key. Where is the key?
The key, what key?
Before the words fell, O'Connell had already sensed the danger and rushed over, quickly engaging the man in black in a fierce gunfight. Evelyn took the opportunity to strike the man's eyes with a candle. The two fled the scene quickly amid the chaos. The ship was instantly engulfed in flames, and the roar of battle shook the air. The situation descended into complete chaos. While everyone was scrambling to save their lives, Jonathan, amid the commotion, recovered the key Evelyn had dropped. In the end, everyone was forced to jump overboard to escape. Thus, amid endless pursuit and flight, O'Connell and his teammates finally reached the outskirts of the Hamyonaptra ruins. The team led by Benny arrived at almost the same moment. As the sun rose in the east, the silhouette of the legendary city of the dead gradually emerged, like a ghostly castle embedded in the depths of the desert. The group rushed towards the ruins desperately. Evelyn, riding on a camel, seemed to have long been one with this land, being the first to enter Hamyonaptra. Afterwards, relying on her mastery of ancient Egyptian esoteric knowledge, Evelyn quickly found the entrance to the underworld. She cleverly used the bronze mirrors placed on the ground to reflect sunlight into the dark passage, revealing the location of a secret passage that was exactly where the ancient Egyptians performed their mummification rituals. However, as the group moved forward to explore, a sudden faint and eerie echo pierced the silence, sending a shudder through all the explorers' hearts. In this moment of intertwined chaos and panic, O'Connell and Jonathan led the team to continue searching, but encountered the approaching American team at a corner. The American team, relying on their greater numbers, arrogantly ordered O'Connell to leave. O'Connell naturally refused to back down. In this tense stalemate, Evelyn's eyes inadvertently glanced at the ground, and she spotted an inconspicuous crack. Drawing on her extensive Egyptological knowledge, she immediately realized this meant the underground underworld might have more levels than the one they were currently on, so they went underground and began digging upwards. Among them, the warden who had accompanied O'Connell, driven by greed, seeing numerous treasures along the way, broke away from the team and embarked on a solo treasure hunt. He crawled through a narrow passage and reached a stone wall. Gazing at the blue gemstones on the wall, thinking he had struck it rich, he took out a knife and began prying them off. What he didn't notice was a bug crawling out of one of the gemstones that had fallen to the ground, which then quietly crawled through the gap in his shoe. In an instant, the warden felt a sharp, piercing pain shooting up from his foot. He began tearing at his clothes with his hands, trying to get rid of the unknown source of pain, but at this moment, the scarab inside his body, as if it had found paradise, squirmed joyfully and arbitrarily, winding its way up along his abdomen, and finally burrowed straight into his head. On the other side, the American team also made a discovery. They found a hidden compartment under a statue. Fearing that the compartment contained traps, they planned to send a coolie forward to investigate. Sure enough, when the coolie dug open the compartment, a high-pressure hydrochloric acid trap was triggered. The coolie was dissolved by the acid in an instant, turning into a pool of blood on the spot. On the other side, just as O'Connell and the others were feeling bored from their fruitless search, Jonathan picked up a stick he had found somewhere, and started playing golf with the stones on the ground. But who would have thought that this swing would accidentally trigger a hidden mechanism, causing a sarcophagus buried under the statue to suddenly fall down, crashing heavily onto the ground. Evelyn then explained, there were only two types of people buried here, either they were of noble birth, or they had committed heinous crimes. Looking at the patterns on the sarcophagus, Evelyn thought of the black box. This was exactly the key the man in black had mentioned that night. After a few minor incidents, they placed the key in position. As the key turned slowly, the sarcophagus lid opened. Looking at the mummy in front of them, they found that he had been dead for more than 3,000 years, yet retained an unusually vivid hue, as if he had just passed away. At this moment, O'Connell also noticed that the inner side of the sarcophagus lid had several shocking scratch marks, clearly visible. This meant the mummy had been buried alive. At the same time, the American team made a new discovery. They took down the box from the hidden compartment. The experienced man in the red hat translated the inscriptions on it, and found that it was covered with curses. The red hat whispered the ancient words, "There is an undead evil creature, if it is resurrected. In accordance with sacred law, this curse shall be fulfilled. He will kill all those who open the box, take their internal organs and blood, and through this method, be revived, becoming an evil monster that plagues the world." As soon as the words were spoken, the cowardly Benny shouted that the curse was coming true, and fled in haste without looking back. After hesitating for a moment, the remaining four still opened the box. When the lid was lifted, thick smoke filled the air. After the smoke cleared, a tattered book came into view. It was exactly the legendary Book of the Dead. At this moment, one of the team members kicked the box, and when it opened, several mysterious containers were hidden inside, which were exactly the ones that held Ankh Suleiman's internal organs earlier. The group's eyes lit up instantly, thinking this was the real treasure, so they each took one sacred urn and put it away. In the evening, when Evelyn passed by the American team's camp, she inadvertently caught sight of the Red Hat trying repeatedly to pry open the Book of the Dead. Seeing this, strong curiosity drove her. While all the camp members were fast asleep, Evelyn sneaked into the camp and took the Book of the Dead. She used the black key found earlier to unlock the book. The book was filled with ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, and Evelyn, who had specialized in them, could read every one. So out of habit, she translated and recited them aloud as she went.
Amun-Ra, Amun-Day. It speaks of the night and of the day. Sueyaharum utopsin mas ibet baya. Imatipin sumpike sitsue yatue yatue yatue.
No! You must not read from the book!
In an instant, Imhotep, the high priest sealed for 3,000 years, awoke from his slumber. The silent night sky was instantly torn apart by shrill wind howls. Immediately afterwards, a sky-darkening swarm of locusts pounced on the camp. Everyone turned and fled without hesitation. The coolies who ran slowly were instantly engulfed by the locusts. People scattering in all directions were like irrational animals, rushing into the unknown depths. The bespectacled man accidentally fell while running. His glasses flew off, and Benny even crushed the shards of his glasses, fleeing alone without mercy. When the bespectacled man got up, he saw a dark figure flash by, followed by a shrill scream. At the same time, O'Connell and the others took shelter in a stone chamber in the city of the dead. The ground suddenly shook violently, a small mound in front slowly rose, then, countless scarabs gushed out like a tide, plunging everyone into inescapable fear. The group fled for their lives. Accidentally, the three were separated by the scarab swarm. Evelyn stumbled into a hidden secret door. She looked around in panic, and happened to encounter the American team's bespectacled man. Just as she breathed a sigh of relief, and was about to approach, the scene in front of her terrified her. She never expected that the bespectacled man's eyes and tongue had actually been transplanted onto the high priest Imhotep. Evelyn stepped back in fear, but strangely enough, Imhotep didn't harm her. Instead, he used a deep and hoarse voice called out Ankh Suleiman's name. At this moment, O'Connell appeared, trying to pull Evelyn away to escape. Seeing O'Connell beside Evelyn, the anger in Imhotep's heart gradually erupted. The group rushed towards the door. Just as they rushed out, a group of men in black suddenly appeared in front of them, blocking their escape route, telling them Imhotep didn't belong to this world at all, and human weapons were completely useless against him. They should leave here as soon as possible. As descendants of the pharaoh's bodyguards, it was their duty to prevent Imhotep's resurrection, so the leader of the bodyguards led his men into the ruins together. At the same time, Benny got lost in the ruins. Suddenly, Imhotep appeared silently behind him, faced with the terrifying mummy. Benny first took out a cross, praying to God to protect him, just as a shepherd protects his flock. Then he rummaged through his things, and found a Sikh token to pray for protection. As Imhotep gradually approached, Benny even spoke in Chinese. When nothing worked, in the end, Benny recited the ancient Egyptian slave language, making Imhotep think that he might be useful. Imhotep handed a pile of gold artifacts to Benny, taking advantage of his greed, making Benny his assistant. Soon, the group returned to Cairo. Everyone was discussing their plan to leave, but little did they know. Benny had already taken Imhotep to the bespectacled man's residence. In order to restore his appearance, Imhotep needed to find the 4 men who had taken the sacred urns, by sucking their blood, and seizing their organs to repair his body.
And consummates the curse which you and your friends have brought down upon yourselves.
At this moment, above the city, the sky suddenly turned dark. Countless fireballs fell from the sky, and the entire city was plunged into thick smoke and flames. O'Connell took Evelyn and fled towards the staircase. Suddenly hearing a monster's roar from upstairs, they rushed to the bespectacled man's room, only to find that he had long since turned into a mummy. While Imhotep was nearby, undergoing self-healing, the resurrected Imhotep had become extremely powerful. All attacks were like hitting steel. Unable to shake his defense at all, O'Connell fought back with all his strength. But this heavy blow failed to cause him any harm, and instead, he was slapped away by Imhotep. Imhotep then approached Evelyn, as if he even wanted to kiss her. But, at this moment, a cat suddenly jumped in through the window. Imhotep instantly turned into a tornado, and fled the scene in panic to find a way to destroy Imhotep. Evelyn and her companions went to the museum to seek the curator's help, and they accidentally learned the curator's identity. Both the curator and the bodyguard leader were members of an ancient organization, tasked with preventing Imhotep's resurrection for generations. The curator explained Imhotep's past in detail, and why he was extremely afraid of cats, for cats are the guardians of the underworld, and before he was fully resurrected, they were the only ones who could restrain him. Now, Imhotep was only one step away from complete resurrection. He needed to absorb the flesh and blood of the Americans who had taken the sacred urns, to restore his complete physical form, and Imhotep's most urgent goal was to resurrect Ankh-Sunamun. He had regarded Evelyn as a sacrifice for resurrecting Ankh-Sunamun, which was why he had done all those things to her earlier. As Imhotep's power continued to grow, dark celestial phenomena began to sweep across the city. Seeing this, the group acted quickly to find the other Americans who had taken the sacred urns. But just as they found Benny, a shrill scream rang out. The man in the red hat had already been drained of his flesh and blood by Imhotep, who had also taken the Book of the Dead and the sacred urn from him. As each American who had taken the sacred urns was killed, Imhotep was also about to complete his resurrection, regaining his full form. Afterwards, Imhotep turned into yellow sand, and quietly entered Evelyn's bedroom, while she was fast asleep, and kissed her secretly. But at this moment, O'Connell appeared with a cat. Imhotep instantly turned into a cloud of yellow sand, fleeing awkwardly through the window, and even politely closed the window before leaving. To completely destroy Imhotep, the group decided to go to the museum. Evelyn speculated, if the Book of the Dead could resurrect Imhotep, then perhaps the Book of Ammon-Ra could subdue him. However, just as they began to take action, the noise of the city surged sharply. Crowds of civilians holding torches flocked towards the museum. They were controlled by Imhotep, shouting in unison Imhotep's name, having become his slaves. Witnessing this terrifying sight, Evelyn and the curator hurriedly found an ancient stone tablet, trying to decipher the inscriptions, trying to find the hiding place of the Book of Ammon-Ra. Soon, Evelyn made a discovery. After careful and patient analysis, she asserted, the golden book was hidden inside the sun god statue in Hamyonaptra. Jonathan prepared the car outside, ready to evacuate immediately if the situation got out of control. As the bewitched crowd gradually approached, O'Connell and the others hurriedly jumped into the car, Trying to break through the siege, crowds of civilians chased after them, pouncing on the car. Frantically, as the civilians drew near, everyone began to fight back with all their strength. But one of the cursed Americans was still dragged out of the car by the crazy civilians. Immediately afterwards, Imhotep stepped out of the crowd. With another scream, the last person who had taken a sacred urn was drained dry by him. Imhotep had completed his full resurrection, and now he was no longer afraid of cats. On the other side, O'Connell and his group were also surrounded by the civilians. At this moment, Imhotep used Evelyn's companions as hostages, demanding that she leave with him. Seeing no better option, Evelyn had to agree to go with him, but just before leaving, Imhotep went back on his word, ordering the civilians to kill the others. At this life-or-death moment, O'Connell cleverly pried open the manhole cover under his feet, leading everyone to jump into the sewer, escaping the pursuit. At the same time, to buy time for everyone to escape, the curator stayed alone at the museum gate to resist, but was overwhelmed by the crazy civilians, and finally sacrificed heroically. O'Connell and the others knew Imhotep would definitely go to Hamunaptra now to perform a summoning ritual, to resurrect Anksunamun, so to reach Hamunaptra as soon as possible, and rescue Evelyn. They went to the Giza airbase to find their old friend, the ace pilot Winston. When Winston heard their request, his blood boiled with excitement, agreeing without hesitation to join their adventure, preparing to fly to Hamunaptra. But due to the limited seats on the plane, Jonathan and the bodyguard leader had to be tied to the wings. However, just as the plane flew into the airspace above the desert, where Hamunaptra was located, Imhotep spotted them. He raised his hands, shaking the desert violently. Countless yellow sand gushed out from the ground, instantly forming a 100-meter-high sand wall. Charging straight towards the plane, Winston tried his best, pushing the plane to its maximum speed, trying to avoid the impact of the sand wall, but was still engulfed by the turbulent sea of sand. At this moment, Evelyn, who was being held hostage by Imhotep nearby, saw this and kissed Imhotep. The unexpected kiss interrupted Imhotep's spellcasting, causing the once turbulent sea of sand to lose control, drifting down in flakes. Yet just as a hint of relief appeared on Evelyn's face, the plane lost control due to the earlier impact, plummeting rapidly, falling straight into the desert with black smoke trailing. The moment the plane hit the ground, it didn't explode. O'Connell and the others escaped unharmed. But Winston was not so lucky. He sank into the quicksand, along with the out-of-control plane, and disappeared. Then, Imhotep and his group had already reached the ruins. He knew O'Connell and the others would definitely chase after them. So he blew the powder from the sacred urn onto the stone wall, and then chanted an ancient incantation. The mummies in the walls were awakened. These once loyal monks were resurrected again, and began to serve Imhotep, chasing after O'Connell and the others. On the other side, O'Connell and the others had already entered the ruins. As expected, they were soon attacked by the mummies. By a stroke of fate, they found the location of the sun god statue. The approaching mummies were blown to pieces by the bomb ignited by O'Connell. The debris from the explosion blocked one of the passages, buying them precious time. But mummies kept coming one after another, just as the leader charged at the mummies, struggling to hold back the enemy. O'Connell and Jonathan finally succeeded in retrieving the Book of Ammonius Array from the hidden compartment of the statue. At the same time, Evelyn woke up on the altar. Beside her was Anksunamun's resurrected body. As Imhotep clutched the Book of the Dead tightly and approached slowly, the unfinished summoning ritual from 1,000 years ago was about to restart. At this moment, Anksunamun's soul was summoned once again. Before long, black water filled with ancient Egyptian mystique emerged, possessing her withered mummy body. At this very moment, the ritual was interrupted once again. Jonathan arrived with the Book of Ammonius Array. At the sight of the Book of Ammonius Array, Imhotep panicked instantly, charging forward to seize it, and at this moment, O'Connell took the opportunity to use the sword in his hand, cut off the chains binding Evelyn. Seeing this, mummies from all directions surrounded them like bloodthirsty beasts. O'Connell had to wield his sword, fighting desperately. At the same time, Evelyn also fell into an endless predicament. Anksunamun's resurrection had made her even more insane, launching a terrifying chase against Evelyn. At this moment, all hope rested on Jonathan's shoulders, but unlike Evelyn, who had profound knowledge of ancient Egyptian culture, Jonathan only knew a smattering of ancient Egyptian writing. Fortunately, at the last moment, under Evelyn's remote guidance and prompts, Jonathan finally found the key part of the incantation and recited the final word. The mummy guards besieging O'Connell suddenly stopped their attack and retreated to their original positions one after another. With the power of the Book of Ammonius Array, Jonathan ordered the guards to eliminate Ankh-Sunamun. Hearing this, Imhotep flew into a rage, charging at Jonathan, preparing to retrieve the Book of Ammonius Array. But by then the guards had already killed Ankh-Sunamun. Witnessing his lover's death once again, Imhotep became even more furious, stepping forward and grabbing Jonathan by the throat, only to be intercepted by O'Connell, who arrived just in time, who chopped off one of his arms with a single sword strike. Seeing this, Imhotep immediately turned his target to O'Connell, but what he didn't expect was that Jonathan took the opportunity to steal the fateful key from Imhotep. With the key in hand, Evelyn opened the Book of Ammonius Array and recited the incantation to condemn Imhotep at the top of her lungs.
Kadishmal, Kadishmal, Paradus, Paradus.
The chariot stripped Imhotep of his powers, leaving only his physical form. Afterwards, the powerless Imhotep charged at them in anger. O'Connell stabbed him through the body with a single sword strike. Finally, under the power of the powerful vengeful spirit, Imhotep's resurrection came to a complete end, just as everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The stone doors inside the ruins began to move slowly. It turned out that, during the chaos of their fight, the greedy Benny had been searching for treasure alone in the depths of the ancient tomb, and finally triggered the undead self-destruct mechanism. The huge stone doors closed slowly. Benny was ultimately trapped forever, amid the glittering treasure and countless scarabs, unable to escape ever again, while O'Connell and the others struggled with all their strength. At the last moment before the ruins collapsed, escaped Hamyunaptra, leaving this land full of undead and curses behind. Surprisingly, leader Carlos magically appeared in front of them. After saying goodbye to everyone, he silently walked into the depths of the desert. In the end, O'Connell and Evelyn finally got together. The three rode camels and moved forward slowly. Benny's golden backpack, under the sunlight, shone brightly. It was all over at last. Yet the story of Egypt and mummies continues to write new chapters. The 1999 film The Mummy was never a profound artistic masterpiece, but it is a textbook example of an exciting commercial adventure film, rooted in the mysterious legends of ancient Egypt, wrapped in the sugarcoating of adventure, horror, and comedy, like a lively fantasy party, immersing the audience completely for 2 hours. More than 20 years have passed, it is still in the hearts of countless people, the adventure classic they most want to revisit. The film follows a classic monster fighting plot, but masters the rhythm perfectly. Archaeologist Evelyn and her brother Jonathan accidentally awaken Imhotep, the mummy cursed for 3,000 years. To prevent Imhotep from resurrecting his lover and destroying the world, they launched an adventure, racing against time in the Egyptian desert. From the traps in Hamyunaptra to the undead pursuit on the streets of Cairo, and finally sealing Imhotep with the Book of Ammonius Array. Each segment of the plot is like clearing levels and upgrading, without complicated twists, but relying on tension and excitement, firmly grasping the audience's attention. When Imhotep summons sandstorms to devour the city, when undead soldiers emerge from the sand, the excitement of escaping from a desperate situation still makes people's palms sweat even today. Watching The Mummy now, the special effects may feel dated, and the plot may seem cliched, but its classic status has never faded. It made many people develop an interest in ancient Egyptian culture for the first time, and fall in love with the adventure genre for the first time. More importantly, it carries the youth of a generation, cheering for Evelyn's growth when they were young, watching it again when they grow up. They can still recall the joy of sitting around the TV with family and friends back then. This kind of resonance with the warmth of memories makes it more than just an ordinary commercial film, and has become a name that comes to mind when talking about adventure films.